And now I'm gonna share my screen. And there you go. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see my screen. Okay, so thank you very much for coming to this webinar, which is about navigating journal selection and how to avoid scams, so how to avoid predatory journal in particular. So as you well know, research takes a huge amount of effort. So you spend lots of time, months, years, just working on a study. And then once it's done, everything that you do is condensated in basically a journal publication. So of course, I recognize there are many other types of research outputs that are equally important as journal publications. But in this webinar, we're going to focus only on journal publications specifically. So selecting the right journals is extremely important. So because the landscape is a bit as in this picture. So as you can see, there are so many information out there. And it's really important for your research to actually reach the correct audience, because this is the only way for your research actually to have an impact and to establish yourself in your research areas and your research context. So it's a bit like, if you think a bit like research has your study has a chemical stimulus, no? What happened in the brain? If the stimulus doesn't arrive to the correct place, so where there are no receptor for the stimulus, it doesn't matter how much the stimulus is important or strong, it will not have any kind of impact. So the same is for your research. So you have to be careful how you transmit your research to other researchers. So, but how can you make an informed decision? It's really difficult. There are thousands of journals out there and thousands of platforms. Now, social media are getting more and more important to advertise your research as well. So it's really difficult to understand what you can trust, basically, where you can put your study, what can help you to have your study up there. Okay, so the aim of this session is actually to help you, to provide you with a framework to navigate the publishing landscape. So I'm going to go through some tools that you can use to evaluate journals in a quantitative way and in a qualitative way. And these tools will also help you to avoid actually predatory journals. So the first thing, though, you have to do, so even before starting to look for a journal for your research, so the first thing you have to do is to be honest with yourself and just stop and think about your research. So know your research thoroughly. So you have to think about your topic. So it's very important to understand what are the key concepts of your study. So if someone would tell you, can you describe in your study in 2-3 words? So what will this word be? Okay, so it's very important for you to understand the main concepts. Then you have to think about which kind of research, which kind of study have you done. So it's a very niche study. So is it very specialized? It's more interdisciplinary? It's an original study? Is it a review? Is it a replication study? So these are all equally important, but you have to understand to recognize what have you worked on. And then, so this will really help you to identify the scope of your study, so which will help you in identify the right journal for you and to identify the right audience. So who can be interested in what you're writing, okay? And in this case, if you find this challenging or if you're unsure about something, usually your supervisor is the right person to ask, or the co-authors of your article, also your peers. Okay, and another thing you have to think about even before starting looking for a journal is if you have any funding requirements. So if your research is funded externally, like for example by UKRI or Wellcome, so you have to think if these funders have any mandates, so have any obligation for you for your publication. So many of these funders sometimes require, for example, that you have to publish open access. So your article must be available to all openly on the publication date. Some other funders require that you publish also your data openly available. Other funders require, for example, that your article must be available on certain index like PubMed. So this is very common, for example, for the medical science, etc. So you have to understand what your funders want and explore your options. And in this case, so this is very important to be compliant. And if you have any issues with that, so you don't know what your funder wants, you can ask us. So you can ask the open research team at the university, because this is our area of expertise. So you can contact us by email, you can look at our website, or also you can check our webinar series on YouTube, where we have lots of information about funder requirements and how you can publish open access and meet these requirements. Okay, so let's say you have thought about these things, and now you can start searching for your journal. So I'm sharing with you a study that was done by PLOS ONE. So PLOS ONE asked authors, so what are you looking for when you're starting actually to look for a journal? And these are the answer. So as you can see, there is discussion with peers, so with colleagues, with other authors, or with your PI or manager. So it appears 3 times as an answer, which is really good. So it's really important to understand, to know about first-hand experience of other people that publish in a specific journal. And then the first answer was the journal publisher website, and also a website that provides metrics about journals. And these are the 2 things that I'm going to show you in this webinar mostly. Okay, so once you have your concept laid out and you know what your funders want, so you can start narrowing your research. So you search for journal using, for example, indexes. So there are many indexes out there. So here I just write down a few of them, some of them. And so with these indexes, for example, you can enter your keywords, so your concepts, and they will provide you with some journals that match the topic of your study. So in some of them you use keywords. In other, for example, if you use the journal finder tool in some publisher website, you can upload your abstract, and then they use some text mining algorithm to find out which journal matches the best with your topic. So they're quite useful to narrowing down your first search. However, they have a big limitation, because of course, when you use a specific index, the index will give you the journals only, so it will give you all information about journals that are actually indexed in this specific index, right? So you might miss out, you might have overlooked other journals that are actually important for you just because they're not indexed in the specific tool you are at the moment consulting. So it is advisable to use more than one index at a time to try to find out, let's say, about 10 titles that could be good for your studies. So once you do that, and you have about 5-10 titles, you can start to evaluate the journals. And I will show you first how you can evaluate journals in a quantitative way, so using metrics. So, and here I will show you Scopus and a bit of Web of Science. So this is Scopus sources. So if you log into Scopus, you go up here, you have sources, and here you can find all the journals that are indexed in Scopus only. And you can look for subject area, title, publisher, ISSN. Okay, so in this example, I look for subject areas, and I just wrote down zoology, and I had a search result of 627 journals. So as you can see, the journals are listed according to the site score, so in descending order. So you have the journal with the highest site score ranked as first, and so on. And here you have all the metrics regarding a specific journals. So if you click here, there are other additional metrics. So it's really metric heavy Scopus. So, and all these metrics are calculated on the citation that the content in each journal basically received. And even if these metrics are calculated on citation, so you have So clear in your mind that these indexes, so these indicators here, this matrix, want to indicate only the visibility of a journal. So they don't have anything to do with the quality of the articles that are published in the journal. But they give you an idea of how much a journal is visible. So everything with Scopus is based on the site score. So the site score is the Scopus method to quantify the impact of a journal. And it's calculated basically looking at the number of citation to documents that are published in a 4-year period divided by the number of the same documents published in the same period. And documents are articles, review, conference, books, chapter, and data papers. So as you can see, there's no editorial materials. And another thing to always have in mind is that the site score is not a field-weighted metric. So if you compare to journals using the site score, so do never compare to journals that are in 2 different fields. So do not compare zoology with biomedicine, or do not compare biomedicine with history, for example, okay? Because according to the field, the citation varies a lot. So you can't really use this matrix to compare journals in different subject area. So if you press on the journal on the list, so for example, I pressed on the journal that is ranked first, you have more information about the journal. Here it tells you how the site score was calculated. It gives you a kind of prediction of what it's going to be for this year. And if you scroll down, it gives you also the rank of the journal according to the percentile. So what does it mean? So each journal is categorized according to the scope and to the topic of the article in different categories. So in this case, you have annual reviews of animal biosciences is categorized in more than one category. So you have it in animal science and zoology, veterinary, genetics, and another couple if you scroll down. So Scopus calculates the rank of this journal in each one of the category. Okay, so for example, this particular journal is the first ranked over 456 journal. Excuse me. Okay, and this means that it's in the 99th percentile. So this means that is in the top 1%, which means that 99% of all the other journals that are in the same category have a lower score. So this journal have a very high score. And usually you can find, what you can find on the website is you will find this kind of classification. Usually the journals are classified according to Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, so the quartiles. And the quartiles basically correspond to this percentile here. So journals that are in Q1 means that they are in the 25 top percent. So 75% of all the other journals in the same categories are lower, so receive lower citation. Okay, so all of this is done with the site score. And then Scopus gives you other 2 kind of metrics. So the Shimago journal rank, which is calculated externally and is based more on the reputation of a journal. So it's more like if a journal is cited by a journal that is considered more with a higher reputation, you acquire more a higher score. So if your journal is cited by Nature, you will get a higher score than if you're cited by a different journal that is less reputable. And then you have the SNP. There is another matrix that takes into account the citation potential in different fields. So if you want to know more information, I had it here, so a couple of links. But what is useful in Scopus is that you can actually compare directly journals. So if you are in the profile of the journal that you were choosing, so annual review of animal biosciences, you go up here and you have a compare sources. And so there is a window that pops up, and then you can compare up to 10 different sources at the same time. So for example, here I add the behavioral processes, which is the red line. But you have always to be very careful to what you're comparing if you're using matrix, because, so from this graph, you would say, okay, the blue line here goes up steep, the site score is much higher, so it looks like if it's a much better journal. However, if you check more carefully the other matrix, so you will understand why this happens. And this happens, so you have your answer here. So if you look at the percentage of review articles published by year, so as you will as well understand from the title, Annual Review of Animal Biosciences publishes mostly reviews, and reviews accumulate much more citation than original research articles. So this is just how it works. So for this reason, the CITE score is much higher. Okay. So when you evaluate journal using metrics, never look at one only. Always look at the whole picture. And as well, it may be a bit, you might not understand, you say, but why the CITE score is much higher? But then if you look at the citation by year, the red journal, so the behavioral processes, has a much higher citation by year than the annual reviews. And this is always depends on how things are calculated. So this is a cumulative measure. So this is calculated looking at the citation in a precise year. So let's say all the citation that the journal received in 2022 on all publications, okay? So this is what it means. If you look the other charts, so behavioral processes has been out there for a much longer period of time. So the amount of document published is much higher than the annual review of animal biosciences. And this is why the citation here is much higher. So this measure. So, okay, just for saying, use different metrics to have the whole picture. So if you want to evaluate a journal quantitatively, you can also use Web of Science. So this is a bit the antagonist of Scopus. And Web of Science has the master journal list. So from this index, you can find all the journals that are indexed on Web of Science. So here you can look for journals using keywords, but you can also match the manuscript. For example, you can upload your abstract and find the best match, and you will have a list of journals. So in this case, if you enter zoology, you get 508 results. And then if you click on each journal, so here I want to find the same journal as before, it opens another page and you will find a link with the citation journal report. And the citation journal report is a very extensive report. So here I make a short video just to show it's really long and comprehensive report that takes into consideration lots of metrics. And how you can see here, it appears the journal impact factor that, as you will know, is one of the most popular metrics used to evaluate journals. And as you can see, it's not used in Scopus because the journal impact factor is a product of Web of Science. Okay, so if you go down so many metrics, and you also have a 5-year impact factor. And the journal impact factor is a bit different than the CITE score in Scopus. And very quickly, so I will just show you the difference. So here is the same journal as before, so on a review of animal biosciences, and here's the journal impact factor. So how it is calculated. So the first difference, this is calculated over 2 years, not over 4. But the stunning difference is this. So here, the numerator, you can see that it considers the citation to the items published in the 2 years, so 2020, 2021. And at the denominator, you have the number of citable items in 2020, 2021. So items and citable items are two different things. So it means that here, the numerator, you consider all the documents published in a journal, so including editorial materials. But at the denominator, you exclude the editorial material. So in this way of calculate this indicator created a lot of controversy because you can manipulate it easily. Because a journal, for example, if you want to increase the impact factor, can increase the amount of editorial material that it published. So you can increase the amount of letter or commentary. So you increase your numerator here, and your impact factor will become higher. Okay. So these are the two ways in which you can evaluate your journal quantitatively. And then more important is how you evaluate your journal in a qualitative way. So looking at the journal website. So let's say you arrive to your idea, you have about 10 journals in your mind, or maybe 5. You look at the metrics, you say, okay, you can see pretty much where they stand. And then most importantly, you have then to go and look at the website and check for information, because checking this information is what is gonna help you to avoid to fall into predatory journals. So predatory journals has a very brief definition. So are journals that have questionable publishing practices. So they are becoming very hard to spot because they're very good in mimic their reputable journal website, and they ask you for fees. But then, you pay your fees for your publication, but then basically you receive no service. So there's not going to be peer review. Probably there's not going to be typesetting. They're not going to be anything. So once you pay, that's it. They're just probably going to post what you give on their website and nothing else. But it's really difficult. So for some journals, it's very easy to tell them that they're predatory journals. For others, it's quite difficult. So they're becoming very good in hiding. And I added here a couple of tools that are very useful tools to, so there are basically websites where you can find resources to always avoid predatory journals. So one is very famous, is Think, Check, Submit. And the other is the UK RIO, which is the UK Research Integrity Office. So on both these website, you will find lots of resources on how to avoid predatory journal and what to do as well in case you publish on a predatory journal by accident. So what you can do, for example, to retract your publication. So what you should look in a website. So I believe the three things you should look for first are the scope of the journal, editors, and publications. So the scope, of course, because you have to check if the scope of the journal actually fit with the concept of your study, right? The editors is really important and sometimes is overlooked, but you have to think that the editors are the ones that make a journal quality. So they are the ones that define the quality of a journal, because they are the ones that decide if an article is published or not. So they have the final decision, and they are the one that decide where the peer review is going to be. So it's very important for you to check who the editors are. And in particular, you look that a journal has at least 5 members on the editorial board. Try to look at the names. So do you recognize them? Do you know their work? So this is something as well very important to check. So are they big names in the field or not? And as well, check if all the information are actually mentioned on the website. So is the affiliation indicated? Is it correct? Because what predatory journals do, sometimes they just take the name of researchers and they put it on the website, but then maybe the affiliation is wrong. It has happened to me that once I received an email because I think a researcher found this picture on an editorial board of a journal, but then the affiliation was wrong. So they just took his picture randomly from internet. So just check, double check, Google the name and see if the indication are correct. And then you should look also at the publication. So what do you think about the publication in this journal? Do you think are good quality? So do you recognize some of the work that has been done, that has been published from this journal? Do you recognize some of the authors? So how many articles are published per issues? As well, this is quite an important flag, because if you see like an issue that have only a couple of publications, one publication, then most definitely is a predatory journal, okay? And this also a very important factor because, you know, if you check the scope, if you check the editors, if you check the publication, you can really understand if the scope of your article actually fits. And so you know that you will have higher chances for your article to go under peer review and not getting editorial rejection straight away. After that, you should look at other information. Of course, the more the information is clear on the website, the more the journal should be reputable, okay? Because you will see the predatory journal often have mistakes in what they write, or they are not clear in what they write in the information. So in particular, you should check at the peer review policies. So usually the journal should offer at least 2 peer reviewers, okay, to be a good quality check of your article. And then it should specify which type of peer review your article will go through. So it would be single blind, double blind, it could be whatever, but it must be written. And also look at the time that is specified for the peer review. Usually it might be long and all, depends on the field, the length of the peer review might change. But if a journal tells you, yes, you're going to have the peer review done in 2 weeks, then it's a bit weird. So this might be a predatory journal, right? Because it's not something that will happen to have peer review in 2 weeks, okay? Or at least it will not be a peer review of good quality, because you have as well to consider to give time to the reviewer to review your work properly. Then also check the author instruction as well. There are clear information about copyrights. There are clear information that you have to pay a fee. I saw some predatory journal that they don't have this information, but they want you to log in to access this information. And this is a bit of a trick because, of course, you will have to log in, so you will give your detail, and then they will be able, to send you lots of emails and stuff like that. So this information should be clear on the website, available to everybody without any login. And another important thing that I will look in a journal, because as I said before, the landscape is so hard. Information outside is there's so much information that it's really difficult for your research to be visible. So something that can actually increase the visibility of your research in a journal is to look where the content is indexed. So for example, here I have an example. This journal have loads of indexes, content in loads of different indexes, and this is good because it means that your research is going to be easily discoverable. And also look if the journal offers any kind of advertising services. So some journals, for example, offer you to do different posts on social media or to have press releases and things like that. Okay. Then you can look even a step further. You can look at the ethics of the journal. So you can check, for example, this is quite important, if the journal is a member of COPE. So COPE is a committee of publication ethics, and basically it wants to guarantee good practice in peer review. Okay. Then you can also look, for example, if the journal have any policy regarding equality and diversity in publishing and published process, if you're more interested in this kind of thing. And another important thing to check if actually the journal adheres to any open science practice. So for example, does the journal require you to share your data according to FAIR principle? Does the journal allow you to use your ORCID with your publication? Does it adopt the credit taxonomy? Does it support open peer review? This is becoming one of the crucial points, I believe, because as you know, we are in a moment in which research integrity is a bit in crisis. So more and more studies are found where data are faked or made up, or, so there's a loss of integrity in research just because there is so much pressure on researchers to publish and to produce. So open peer review is something that wants to kind of fight this, because, you will see you can read basically all the discussion between the author and the peer reviewer, so you can actually understand how the process works and actually what was asked to be changed in the study and everything. So I believe this really supports to have better quality peer reviews and better quality articles in the end. And then you can also check, for example, if the journal adheres to open science initiatives, such as the Initiative for Open Citation, Initiative for Open Abstract. Okay, so it's very important for you to check all this information, but as I said before, predatory journals are very good anymore in mimicking website of more reputable journals. So you always have to check this information. But it's quite easy. So the more information you have on a website, the easier it is to check it for you. Let's say, for example, Matrix is a very easy way to check if a journal is fake or not. So for example, I have here functional ecology. If you go in the Matrix section, you can find the site score and the journal impact factor. So once you have these two numbers, you can just log into Scopus and you can check if the numbers are true, right? And the same in Web of Science. So you can say, okay, that's true. And here I just put you some example of what you shouldn't find in a journal. So as I was saying before, check the editorial board, always very important. So for example, the journal didn't even have, so it doesn't have an editorial board. It said they are in the process of appointing an editorial board. And no matter what, they had some publication on the journal. So they have some article published, but I don't know how this can happen. How can you publish a journal without even having an editorial board? So this is for sure a predatory journal. Here as well, this is another editorial board that you wouldn't like to see. So there are only names, but there's no affiliation, so you can't really check who this person are. Another thing is, like, for example, they tell you, as I said before, that you will have a copyright form with publication fee, but they don't tell you which fee do you have to pay. And another thing you can look is, so many times predatory journal add logos on their website just to show that they are more, just as a sign of reputation, let's say. So, but this is also what makes them easy to spot, because it's very easy. For example, here they say that they are a member of COPE. If you log in to the COPE website, there is a list of actual members, so it's really easy to double check that this journal was not there. So so it just is enough. If you see all this logo that looks a bit, okay, they're a bit too many, they don't make too much sense, just check one of the of this affiliation and see if the journal is actually affiliated or not. Okay, now for the last concluding. So there are, as I show you there's so some predatory journals are very easy to spot. And in other cases, it's a bit more a blurry line. And I don't know, probably you have heard about the case of NDPI and Frontiers. So there is a bit of debate on internet in particular to understand if these are predatory journals or not. So most of researchers, for example, consider MDPI a predatory journal. And there was very recently a kind of debate because MDPI created a kind of a partnership with ResearchGate. And because of that, lots of people decided to leave ResearchGate because they consider MDPI a high predatory journal. And the same kind of happened as well with Frontiers. And Frontiers was added to the list of questionable publisher, although, you know, it has been about for quite a long time. There are many publications in Frontiers, etc. So why is this happening? So basically, these two publishers are considered predatory because they have a very aggressive marketing strategy. So they tend to send lots of email to authors to try to invite them to submit articles, which is usually a strategy used by predatory journal. And they use as well, they publish high number of special issues. And as well, this usually is considered a bit a predatory practice because, you know, when you have a special issue, you invite authors. So, you know, the acceptance rate would be much higher. So they will get all the money from these publications. But in particular, there were doubts regarding the peer review processes. So they say the peer review is not of high quality, it's a bit too fast. And there were some peer reviewers as well that they complained because they would say, you know, I rejected an article, and they decided to add a third peer reviewer until the article then was accepted. So these are the problems. And this is why they are considered by a good part of the community predatory. However, I have to say, if you look at the practices of this journal, so they have some good practices there. So they are, for example, indexed in DOAJ, which is the directory of open access journal. And some of these journals have also DOAJ seals, which is usually given to journals that follow good practices in open access publishing. They are COPE members, so I checked. And they are applying different open science practices exactly because they want to prove that they're not predatory. So they're becoming a bit more transparent. For example, NDPI is one of the few journals that have a strong policy for open peer review, exactly because they want to prove that the peer review is not bad, but it's good quality. So there is this. It's difficult. So I wouldn't say they are all predatory. Maybe some journals of this publisher are predatory, so they have a very different standards in their journals. So I would say, yeah, if you consider to publish it with some of those, so with MDPI or Frontiers, just think about what we talk about today. Just revise the website, and yeah, what can I say? Think, check, and then submit. Okay, and this is it for today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, I'm just stopping the recording.